You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Next Door podcast.
Work's been breaking my back, already packing my bags. Punch that time card like a ticket out of here.
Welcome to today's episode of Entrepreneurs Next Door podcast with Anthony Morrow from Pxl.house right here in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Now, usually with these episodes, we encourage you to listen to while you're riding in your car, on your way to work, but this one's a little bit different. This is the one to grab tea, coffee, and if you're like me, a notepad and paper, because to hear Anthony describe his approach, his experience with dealing with creative people and how to manage them, along with being a high-level creative himself, you'll need to take notes. And if you don't, I can send you mine. Enjoy the conversation. And so, Anthony, for the original passion in your heart for creating visuals and settings, it started with Star Wars, which I'm sure thousands of people would probably say the same exact thing. But actually, could you dive into that for a second, or how that started?
Sure, yeah. Well, I always loved to draw. My dad was an artist at heart. He was a truck driver, but he always loved art, and he was wonderful at it. So early on, that was just around. He'd be doing caricatures of Jack Palance and other actors from the day, and he was amazing. Had a family support, so he really never delved into it or made that leap. But since day one, I always wanted to draw and paint and create illusions. And yeah, when I saw Star Wars, that was it. I remember going with my older sister, took me for the afternoon movie, and it was just mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. And then I looked at the concept art and the way it was created, and I just knew that was for me. That was amazing.
Did that pursuit then take you through like high school into college? Could you actually connect a couple of dots that me and you have actually I never asked this question to you before.
What's that?
Was it art school? Was that always it?
Always.
Or did you come back to it?
Always.
So cool. Yeah, can you talk about that? Because oftentimes that's not it. The creative fire in you, did that take you through high school and college?
It did, yeah. I never understood. I would ask my friends what they want to be when they grow up early on. 5 years old, 7 years old, and they didn't know, and I had no idea why. I was like, wow, that's such a shame. How do they not know? And then it took me right through. There were some things that I thought about possibly being. Marine biologist was one. I loved science. I loved animals. I loved nature. Really felt connected to it all. And really, it was just about journaling and drawing and being out there and painting as well, for nature's capturing it and the beauty of it. And how do I make a visual representation of that? How do I inspire people when they look at something that, when I look at nature and it inspires me, how do I create that feeling in someone else with one of my illusions, or one of my illustrations or one of my pieces?
You mentioned your dad was a creative himself.
Yes.
Not as a career per se, but other than your dad, did you have anybody else champion you early or believe in you early in that artistic venture?
I didn't. We were pretty isolated behind the house. We were basically on a soybean and corn farm. So
That's awesome.
There wasn't a lot of creative.
It's so good.
There's a lot of creative people around. There's a lot of overalls, maybe less teeth than people, but it was a really kind place and supportive place nonetheless. But I saw people work really hard and sacrifice and frugal. There was a lot of frugality, and it taught me to work hard, that you can do things. And here's people moving whole hundreds of acres of things and turning them into something from nothing and cultivating them and taking them to market and selling them and breaking their back and working day and night. And they didn't think it was much. But if you think about making something from nothing, it definitely is the same career path I'm on. And it was inspiring to watch. And I actually took that work ethic with me. And I think it's the one thing that really pushed me and separated me from a pack that I was surrounded by, was never stopping, never giving up, always pushing forward, working hard, a good work ethic. I think that really took me to the level I needed to be at business-wise, so that I could continue doing the art that I wanted to do.
Have you always been in business by yourself, for yourself, or were you under a bigger umbrella and then branched out? What has that road been like?
I always wanted to be by myself because I watched my father not able to do the art he loved to do and support 4 children, rightfully so. He had responsibilities. And he was with a union as well, and not treated very well. Pushed into early retirement, not in control of a lot of things in his destiny, and really working hard and trying hard, but not in control no matter how hard he worked. And I said to myself, I don't want to be there. I wanted to be in control of the destiny. I realized that the security of working for someone else was quite an illusion, and that with some extra effort, I could create more security for myself than working for someone else. And that pushed me again. I think that things around me continuously pushed me, and that heat and pressure kind of forged me in one direction, which was to be an entrepreneur. And I took off my sophomore year of college part-time to I was offered an opportunity to create, I was a skateboarder at the time and a surfer, and I was offered an opportunity to create skateboard art and decks for a skateboard company. And I couldn't do school and work at the same time, so I ended up going part-time and starting my company right around the sophomore year of college. And that's when I started. And I went back full-time, did an extra year or two to finish up credits while working, but I had started my sophomore year and moved on from there and never stopped.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's a cool story.
Yeah.
You being, as I call you, a high-level creative, which you may or may not agree with, but you being a high-level creative is one thing. But could you talk about not just being a high-level creative, but managing other high-level creatives? Because that is a subject that you need a real specific skill set for. And I would love actually to hear your heart, because I need to know a couple tricks up your sleeve.
Yeah, so that is that's something that I had to learn, and I bet there's somebody out there that can teach it or knew it early on. I just couldn't find them for any mentorship. Dealing with creatives on a daily basis, including yourself, is hard. Managing in a way that is not typical business management or human resources management. Those theories go out the window. They're not very effective with creatives. You're talking about people that think differently, feel more, take things a little more personally because their art is part of themselves. You really have to manage in a different way. You have to step back a bit. You really have to allow mistakes to happen and watch them happen and let people learn on their own and realize that they are going to get something out of it and be better for it if you let it happen. Even though your first instinct is to say you're doing it wrong, take your hand out of the blender, put the lid back on, and don't hit the button. But you kind of just have to let things happen in their own course. And maybe that was a bad reference, but it's one of those things you have to just let happen and let people run their own course. And you really do have to offer them some guidance, but in a way where it doesn't sound like you're giving them guidance. You offer a suggestion that, well, maybe that is really great. I probably wouldn't have handled it just like you. I might have done this, so it's really neat to see another way. And by saying that, you've kind of let them know another way of doing it, but really didn't impose your will upon them. They will be smart enough to take it on and say if that is for them or not, or works within their thinking processes. A lot of the people that are in creatives to this point have ADHD, maybe, on the spectrum slightly. Their brain physiology and chemistry works differently. And if it didn't, it does now after years of creating. And that introversion and that exploration and then that the meditation that comes with working every day all night by yourself on these projects that come from your brain and how to make them a reality. There's something that goes on in the mind that makes them a very different breed, even if they didn't start a very different breed. So right down the line, all of them need individual care and management, and you have to be very thoughtful of the person as an individual. Each one is different. There is no one case of a creative and managing them. Every single one is different.
That's awesome. That is really good. Anybody listening who's that works with or in charge of creatives, make sure you rewind and listen to that last 3 minutes because that was gold. Okay, so here's another section for you, Anthony. We're in Haddonfield.
Yeah.
It's not really the mecca of creatives whatsoever. It is not Philly or New York City or LA or fill in the blank. And
That's right.
so, how did you get here doing this work, and how will it be moving forward? Like how did that all happen, and then what do you see coming up?
So from where I grew up, I always wanted to be in the city. I thought that's where everything happened, and New York was the one I wanted to be in. I attended school in Philadelphia. We couldn't afford to go to Parsons. It was either Paris or LA, and there were a few other schools I was looking at too, RISD, but Philadelphia was close enough that I could drive an hour every day to school, go to school, drive back, and not have to pay for housing. So just because of financial constraints, I stayed in the Philadelphia area, ended up making connections and networking with people in Philly. And when I was going out, it usually was at really creative events with very creative people. They weren't typical events. They were gigantic Halloween parties that were centered around environmental art and fibers and painting, and there might be body painting and crazy, we don't need to go into everything that maybe an art party looks like, but it was very creative and it was a lot of fun, and it was some great memories. After being here in Philadelphia a little bit, I had networked and started working with advertising agencies a little bit. As an illustrator, I started to migrate over into other forms of painting, like digital painting, which took me into retouching and digital illustration and concept art and matte painting and special effects and the things I was really interested in. Those people that I networked with, it's a very incestuous business. So they would migrate over to New York, Boston, back and forth. So I had met someone that was in New York City that was in Philadelphia, and they asked me to come work over at their agency for a little bit, speccing type. And that means that you are sketching things out, type and illustrations of maybe packaging and advertising before they go ahead and design them. So I went over there and I just stayed there. I ended up there for a couple years. I'm not quite sure how. I would just, you'd go and you'd sleep over someone's house, and before you know it, you were in an apartment or at another house, and a couple years go by. So I went from Philly to New York that way. After a couple years in New York, I realized I really missed, again, the outdoors. I really missed the environment, watching the change of the seasons out on the fields in the back and seeing the golden colors happen in the fall when the wheat would turn or the corn would turn. And those signals of seasons through colors and scenery, they were missing. It was always the same color, always the same scenery, the same man-made structures, and I think I really needed that change. That's when I realized it was time to come back. And when I came back to Philly for about 6 years, to Center City. And since the kids, all three kids are in school now here in Haddonfield, and I was missing parades and events, and everything is online now, I could transition to being here in Haddonfield. And it was a big risk when I came here. Everybody would ask where your office is, and I would say in Haddonfield, and they're like, is that Connecticut? Is that Boston? I'm like, no, it's in New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. So I'm pretty much the only one around here. Yeah, it was a big risk, but honestly, hardly anybody comes to the office. It's all done online now. And if we do a production, it's usually on location, and we all go to it.
What do you see? What's coming? You're always like a visionary. I've always been able to see. What do you see for Pxl.house insofar as the next couple of years per se?
Sure. I see a couple things. The first one is just following the track we're on, which is when we started doing retouching and post-production, that's the majority of our work. The clients just, by doing a good job, having good work ethic and listening and being customer service oriented, we were able to grow. And with the DSLR coming in to shoot video and the advent of the, like 2010 when the crash happened, they were hiring less TV crews, and now the photographers were asked to shoot video, and they were doing video and stills at the same time. So we got into video right around 2009, 2010. And what that means is now we're doing the same thing we're doing for retouching, compositing, sky plate changes when you don't have a good sky and you want to put a good sky in another shot. And we're doing all that for video now with editing and color grading. And that's been great. We've been doing it for advertising and commercials. What I'd like to do is get into episodic or TV productions. So we're currently on-ramping this year with new gear and equipment to handle color grading and editing and sound engineering for episodics. And we're hoping that with a couple new contracts we've just signed, that really is the next level. I feel like it's here already, but you never, in this business, you don't count any chickens to hatch. A lot of people talk good game, and it really, when the job's in, it's in.
That's awesome. To finish here, a landing point we always like to use is, what does success mean to you? And we've had separate conversations in just this one today, and you've given me like snapshots of just times, of life. And when you're asked this question 10 years ago, there was like a certain answer, and then it was then 5, right, and 3, and then for some of us 2 months ago, it's a different answer than today.
Absolutely.
But what, in this season, in 2018, December, right before 2019, what does success mean to you?
It's a good question, and it has just changed recently. So success for me for a long time has been creating something impactful or imaginative, being a visionary, orchestrating these big productions of CGI and photography and special effects, and creating these images, and people aren't quite sure how they're made, but they are really impactful and beautiful, and they kind of harken back to the painting you did, and they have a painterly quality, and they visually are captivating. And that would have been success for a long time. And now, after 3 children and employees, my idea of success is less self-centric, and it's a larger picture of, what am I creating for my family, possibly, if they wanted to enter something in like this, and financially to support them. But what is the viability of what we are producing for the next year so that the employees are comfortable and that the business is sound to support everybody? So my idea of success seems more business-centric this year and production-oriented, where even the target of episodics for all the productions going on with Apple TV, Netflix, Prime, Hulu, there's so many now. It's more of a consistent churn and burn of work, where we're still providing high-level quality and great customer service, but the projects have a timeline and they have a definite scope and description, rather than being, these large creative projects that might not have end. These are very specific post-production oriented projects that have a delivery date, and there are 10 of them that season. And then there might be another 10 if they get picked up again. And there's also the other company giving you another 10. So everybody's working pretty steadily in their stability. And I think those are my marks of success this year, is creating more stability as a company for the people that's in it and its employees and their families. I think that, and likewise, that is self-serving. It does it for me too, not to sound selfless. But I think that's more of my goal this year, is to create a stronger business.
I love that. Can I cheat and add one more bonus question?
Go for it.
Would you say you being an entrepreneur was a calling for you?
Absolutely. I don't know if it was a calling. I just know it's still in me, and it calls me every single day. I feel it every single day.
So good.
Yeah, and sharing it is something that I'm really passionate about. I mean, teaching. If I had the time right now, I'd be teaching more. I do some adjunct courses, and a big shout out to Al Gurry at PAFA. He has been a mentor since college, and one of my guiding lights. And one of our local illustrators does children's book art, Bob Bird. Robert Bird's done a ton of books, and he is just a beautiful, beautiful men, both of them, and wonderful artists in their own right, and have been working forever in their institutions in these areas in Philadelphia and New Jersey. So yeah, they have helped that calling, and they keep it going. Staying in that social group, I'll add, keeping those people around you, and especially as men, sometimes we can get isolated, and we can microcosm in our goals. Reaching out and keeping your group around you, not just your primary group, your family, but your secondary group, your friends, and cultivating those hobbies and those interests and sharing those things with people. I have to say that keeps it all going, for sure. It helps.
Well, Anthony,
Yes, Ben.
Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
cutting the time out on a busy Friday. We appreciate, and I know every listener that listens through, besides the creative talk, but from a soybean farm to what a wide scope, and even to finish it with some wisdom. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So,
It's been wonderful.